Yes, hello, it's me again, Asher here. I'm sure that many of you have no idea who the hell I am, and that's okay. I don't tend to talk much to those that engage with me, and I have found that many of my fandom geekiness that I wish to share with the world falls flat. I'll get into more in depth why that is, but before we go any further, I would like to lay down a few ground rules and set down some expectations, since this video is going to upset some folks and I would like to try to circumvent some of the comments if it is possible. I'm sure that it will still happen despite these disclaimers, but I'm going to say it regardless. First and foremost, I don't have anything against anyone in the Final Fantasy XV fandom. I simply do not know you, more than likely, and with the exception of maybe 5 to 10 people that I talk to on a regular basis, I don't typically go out of my way to insert myself into a conversation unless it tickles my fancy or I find the topic interesting. I'm not in any Discord groups, and I make my own opinions based on what I've seen, not what other people tell me. With that in mind, I'm speaking from my own personal experiences in being in the fandom for roughly 3 years from the writer's perspective. My views will not likely to be universal among those people in the fandom, but serve my own feelings in regard to this subject matter. I will state my grievances because I damn well can. I'm not interested in doing a twit longer because it will get lost in translation and there is a lot to cover, which is why I chose to do a video format. I'm going to be talking about 2 Zines in particular, the first being the Callum Zine, and the other is the Lux Corrupta Ardyn Zine, because I do feel it is important to highlight some things that I have noticed. Being specific to a Zine only adds weight to the problems that I have experienced. This is not a personal attack on the mods that run them, those that participate in it, or have bought the Zine, or are planning to buy the Zine. I am highlighting an ongoing trend that I have noticed and felt since I came into the fandom some time ago. I'm not looking for an apology, nor do I want a justification on why things were handled the way they were, especially when it comes to the 2 Zines in question. In the end, I have already made up my mind about my feelings and opinions. Truthfully, the reason that would be given to me, I'll just take it as an excuse to deflect criticism for everything that I intend to say. I am simply pointing out hypocrisy and bringing to light some things that people seem to be unaware of or take for granted when they run these projects, and the people that participate in them. One of the things that actually set me off and caused me to be, well, the only polite way to say this is bothered, was when someone offhandedly mentioned that they are glad that they didn't get on a Zine, which thus far I haven't been able to get my foot in the door on one project. And it is insane that this is an issue to bring up even in a joking manner because of how the Zines are run. I believe that the behavior has affected a lot more people than just me, but they are either dismissed for their opinion or it gets buried because of how Twitter operates. Understand that I do not expect anything more to come out of this besides me venting my frustrations. So with that out of the way, I'll try to be as concise as possible, but I would be lying to you if I said I wasn't upset. And when I get into the details, maybe you'll understand the reasons why I feel the way I do. Before I get into the 2 Zines though, I would like to make a few statements about how the fandom appears, and I'll be honest with you, I've never felt entirely welcomed here. It has little to do with me being a hard individual to get along with. As I mentioned, I barely talk to anyone as a whole, and while I do have some strong opinions and takes on characters, up until now I've been pretty mild when it comes to posting my feelings, but that is going to change. At this point, it doesn't matter what I do or what I'll say, people are going to have these opinions about me, and I feel no need to hold myself back anymore. Those that look at my AO3 can see that I have done a bit of writing under my time frame, and while I don't have many stories, the ones that I have written about, mainly the World of Ruin series, have been a labor of love, and I consider it my magnum opus. This story contains what many would consider a problematic ship, aka Ignis and Ardyn. It also has non-con in it and dives deeper into some moral and psychological issues that many readers may find uncomfortable, don't like, or won't read because of personal reasons. I understand and fully accept that. If something is not your cup of tea, then it's not for you. I have my own limits too, and understand that you should be comfortable and not be forced to read what you do not like. But herein lies one of my complaints about the Zines. There isn't a huge selection. In fact, over the past 3 years, most projects, be they Zines, Bangs, X Weeks, or X Months, are usually centered around 3 specific ships. That is, Promptus, Ignis, or Gladness. And you may get a few handful around the 4 main men, i.e. Noctis, Prompto, Ignis, and Gladio, that get shipped together, but rarely have I seen Zines solely dedicated to a character. I think I've seen a few weeks show up for Enix, some that feature Khorne and Kingsglaives, but my point is that unless you write about these main ships, Zines or anything concerning these characters are non-existent. I have questioned why a character-specific Zine isn't such a common thing in the fandom, and the only thing that I have come up with that it is another form of gatekeeping ships out of projects. One of the few Zines that was a character-specific one I remember was a Noctis Zine, and I think it had them deal with crystal shards or something like that. It was made for a general audience, and if memory serves correctly, no shipping was allowed. I'm not sure why this is a problem, but considering how many characters that Final Fantasy XV features, I've always wondered why this is the case. Either a Zine is dedicated to a specific character pairing, or it purposely keeps out other ships, and that's always been kind of weird to me. Now, I'm sure that you may be asking or pointing out to me if you want to see a particular Zine, do it yourself. Well, I have wanted to for some time, but in order to do that, I did feel that I needed to get my name kind of known by people. Maybe be featured on a project or two, since I know Zines that have not been run by quote-unquote known people tend to not get the support from their audience. So anyone that tells me to just do my own thing, oh, I was. But I did have the intention to try to get on projects and be more involved with the community at large to get my name out there to say that, you know, hey, I'm here and I'm active. Like it or not, networking is pivotal to kicking off a good campaign, and I still think that this is important, but in light of the circumstances, I'm rethinking my strategy about how to go about this. Now, having said that, even if you write about a popular ship that I mentioned, it seems that you have to write them a certain way. Now, I'm going to be real and go ahead and state that I've never bought a Zine in the time that I've been a fandom. The popular ships that I have mentioned are not even in my top 5 preferred ships. They just have never appealed to me, but I have noticed something significant when I look at the previews for the writers on these projects. They seem to all follow a trend of being on the domestic fluff side or written in such a way that there is no drama or stakes within the narrative. And this wouldn't be an issue if there was a variety of stories featured in Zines, but just about all the previews that I've seen come off as so cut and dry. And when you have 10 stories that have the same basic narrative, that shit gets not only repetitive, but boring. We already know the ship is about these 2 characters. That's already a given. We already know that they love each other, but there doesn't seem to be any more to the stories than just surface level pining, repressed feelings, and exclamations of adorations, or superficial issues that can be solved within a blink of an eye. Considering that many of these stories are short as it is, wouldn't it be nice to explore something else about the characters? From what I've seen, the answering is a resounding no. I cannot say for certain if this is a group mentality made by the mods, the publishers they go through to get the book made, or just the writers have all collectively agreed that they won't do anything challenging or something that would be viewed as problematic. Look, I understand liking a particular genre, but it's pretty insincere to flat out reject the idea that there isn't tension in Final Fantasy XV. Sure, it does have its cute moments, but death, loss, angst, and sacrifice are themes that are prevalent throughout this story. Yes, it might not be your cup of tea, but discouraging people from writing about it, or at worst, rejecting writers because they want to, is bizarre. Final Fantasy XV is a dark story. In fact, the Fabula Nova Crystallis stories that Final Fantasy XV comes from are dark in nature. If you don't believe me, look up the Final Fantasy XIII trilogy or Final Fantasy Type 0. They are all created under the same umbrella. No one that has knowledge of these games will tell you that these are upbeat in their totality. They deal with serious issues, and they have never shied away from the idea that there are fucked up things that happen to good, innocent people. So, beyond my grievances, besides changing the narrative for the story, I have also noticed something else that bugged me about the Zines also. The word count for writers. Now, on the logistical side, I understand why there is a limit. You want to squeeze as many writers as you can with the Zines, and the more words that a writer is allowed, the less writers can be on the project. But when I want to read a story, I expect a story, and 1.5k words is just barely enough to get past maybe 2 or 3 scenes. And if you think I'm being unreasonable, think about it from the artist's standpoint. Some of the artist works that I've seen put well over 6+ hours on their Zine pieces. These are the original designs that they are required to sketch, line art, color, plus clean it up and add details. Artists and writers should be spending just about the same amount of effort into Zine projects, but instead of encouraging, let's say, 5 to 8 writers to think, plan, and execute a decent, long-flowing story, there are 10 to 16 cram that barely are able to get a single idea down before their story just abruptly ends. Again, often without anything actually happening in the story. And this disparity has always been something that has bugged me to no end. And this kind of ties into the next problem that I've been seeing. The same people are always on different projects. And you know what? I wouldn't have an issue if there was a universal criteria that was followed for each application that was sent in reference for the Zine. But when the same people keep getting on Zines, and the same people keep hosting these Zines, it starts to become evident that there's favoritism going on, and sometimes it becomes painfully obvious. Look, if you have your group of buddies, and you want to do a Zine, just do a Zine together. What drives me absolutely crazy, and what is damned hurtful, is when these Zines seem to already have a pre-approved list of writers that they intend to have on their projects. And yet, applications are advertised as being for everyone to apply. And you can't tell me that this type of shit doesn't go on. Is that why Zine pages are deleted? Getting rid of a paper trail. For as proud as you are about raising money for a cause, why are these Zine pages deleted? Some haven't been, which is why I've noticed some trends that were happening when I did some digging around on past Zines. But some pages are just gone with those that have gotten the Zine, but they can verify that information offhand since they have the official product. Again, who were the mods running the project? Who was involved with it? One thing I do take exception to is the concept of guest writers and artists. If you know damned well that you want them to participate on a project, then why bother advertising that there are open spots, because clearly there aren't. Whenever I see a guest writer on a project, that pretty much tells me that there are some deals being made behind the scenes. And this doesn't make much sense to me, because I would think that for Zines especially, if you want the best writers and the best artists to represent your cause, I have yet to see a for-profit Zine, which I would actually give a bit more leeway, because at the very least, if something is made that you are profiting off of, it might make a little bit more sense why you are more picky about who gets on the project. But for non-profit projects, just why? Did you not have enough people on the project? If the answer is no, why didn't you reopen applications for the masses again? What about these supposed pitch hitters? What happened to utilizing them? Did the people that you want on the project not apply? What about giving people that are new a fair shot? Now that I mentioned it, it's kind of funny how the same people keep getting on projects, isn't it? And for these guest writers that are on the project, my question is, are you just attaching your name and being on the project for clout or optics? If the answer is no, why did you accept the offer to be a guest and not fill out the application like everyone else? Do you see how it kind of starts to form a slippery slope and seem like the project becomes less disingenuous and becomes more of a vanity project than the foundation or charities that you donate to? And maybe some people see nothing wrong with this, but when you are someone from the outside looking in, it's a bad look. And the same application process should be applied to everyone, and that does not seem to be what is happening. And again, for anyone that says, well, this is a non-profit Zine, or you don't have to be in the Zine to be in the fandom, or people can do whatever they want. Oh, absolutely, I do agree. And that's my point. People are doing whatever the fuck they please, but people just eat this shit up and accept it for what it is. But I'm not one of those people. Again, my issue isn't whether or not I got on or off of a Zine project. That's actually incidental. You know what? If someone is better at me than doing something, then I need to improve my craft and get better. But that isn't the case here. My issue stems from the fact that I am sick of how hypocritical people are. How people gatekeep potential people out of projects, not because of what they've done, but who they are, what they write about, and what they like, and most importantly, who they know. All the talk that I see about keeping antis out of the fandom, about how welcoming the community is, how laid back and everything is sunshine and rainbows here, it isn't. There isn't anything that is done with nuance in regards to project, and if you are labeled a certain way, that is the end of you. I've never had someone flat out tell me that they hate me to my face, but the passive behavior tells me that some people would have no issue with stabbing me in the back if they knew that they could get away with it. And I would rather the former happen to me rather than the latter. And because I am so late into coming into this fandom, I don't have a lot of preconceived feelings about anyone personally, which is why I don't understand why I get treated the way that I do. Now, for those unaware, people have been dipping out of the Final Fantasy XV community for some time. When I was trudging down stories to read before I started writing my own personal fanfic, a mass exodus seemed to have happened between 2018 and 2020. Now, this observation is purely what type of fics that I'm interested in, but there was a notable drop-off in authorship around this time. I've heard mention that the readership count is also dropping on Twitter too, and I'm starting to wonder what the hell was going on in this time frame, but that is neither here nor there, and I'm not interested in digging up drama for the sake of it. The fandom is shrinking. That's just a fact. So it's a bit hard to picture that people on Twitter don't know who is active authors that are in this fandom. AO3 hosts the portfolio for many writers, and even then, you can simply use the search functions to see who is active in the community. What I am implying is that despite my lack of interactions on Twitter, I'm still producing content that can be easily traced if inquiring minds care to look. Keep this in the back of your mind because I'm going to bring this up again. So, with everything that I've said up to now, let's get into the specific Zines. Although the events of the Lux Corrupta Zine preceded the Callum Zine, I'm going to mention the Callum Zine first, since the issues that I have are pretty cut and dry. This Zine was advertised as paying homage to the kings of yore, the beings that created the royal arms that Noctis uses in the game. Since only a small blurb about each of the kings were summoned or mentioned, minus Somnus, Regis, Ardyn, and Noctis, this appeared to be a fun project to get involved in, since the writer had the ability to create whatever the fuck they wanted. When I applied, I didn't request to write about a particular member. No matter what I would have gotten, I would have been happy to create some lore about this. In truth, this was something that was on the bottom of my to-do list anyway because of a potential story with Ignis, but it was nice to try to get my name attached to an official fan project. And as I'm sure that you realize, I got rejected from this Zine. And honestly, while I was a little bit disappointed, I didn't think too much of it until the events of Lux Corrupta Zine happened. Now, out of curiosity, I looked at the Zine's Twitter page, and while no preview panels for the stories have been made public, what was made public were the writers. The Zine was advertised as looking for originally 16 writers, but the public page lists only 13. Now, this Zine utilized a guest writer, but that was only one writer from what I saw, which means in theory they did not have enough writers for their initial project to begin with. My question is, if there weren't enough writers for all the stories supposedly that were going to be written, my rejection seemed to be a little bit unwarranted if they're understaffed by their own admission. This Zine didn't even give me the option to be a pinch hitter for them. They flat out didn't want me to be involved with their project in any capacity. Now that is all I'm going to say about this Zine in particular, because honestly, after Lux Corrupta, I was through wading through bullshit and realized that the writers that had gotten on this project wasn't what was originally advertised, which is odd, but I do believe that since guest writers were implemented in this Zine, there were some things going on behind the scenes. As it stands, I already made up my mind about why I was rejected, and I won't believe that it had anything to do with the quality of my writing. So, as far as Lux Corrupta goes, well, here is where it becomes obvious that this clique nonsense gets taken to the extreme. Before I go into the details, I will give you some hard numbers on AO3. These are things that I have personally gone through and took some digging to verify, but feel free to check these stats yourself. Throughout the course of the Final Fantasy XV fandom on AO3, Ardyn makes up less than 5k worth of fics that have his name featured in stories. There are currently around 33k fics for the entire fandom. If you want to break that down, those 5k stories on Ardyn further, you have to remember that just because his name shows up, that does not mean that he is the main character or have stories featured around him. Those are lesser still. And if you need a comparison about how this works, Noctis appears in 21k worth of fics. Ignis appears in 19k worth of fics. Prompto 18, and Gladio appears in 16k worth of fics. That means that on average, Ardyn appears in stories 3 times less than the 4th ranked popular character in the entire fandom. So to find a person that actually writes about this character is already a rare find. Those that feature him as a main character are even rarer still. Episode Ardyn was released March 25th, 2019. The Final Fantasy XV game was released November 29th, 2016. That means for roughly 3 years, Ardyn's backstory was largely unknown or ignored in that time period. In fact, had Ardyn's DLC not come out, I would argue that Ardyn would be remembered as a character not for being complex, but a theatrical clown. Admittedly, episode Prompto, but more importantly, episode Ignis, did give Ardyn a sinister aura about him. His motives were spiteful, he seemed entirely obsessed, but his tragic backstory was held back to a gross degree prior to his DLC coming out. As someone that has played a few Final Fantasy games, this was a huge letdown to know that Ardyn's backstory was held back for as long as it was. But I am at the very least thankful that it did come out, because without it, I wouldn't have realized how great of a character he is without that knowledge. What I'm saying is that Ardyn having this sympathetic air about him is a fairly new thing that has only appeared within the last few years. I can tell you through many of the stories that I have compiled about this character, the majority of the time, he's written as a villain, and often a one-dimensional strawman because he is the antagonist, so therefore he must be bad. I am not saying that this happened all of the time, because it didn't. I fell in love with Ardyn and Ignis as a pairing chiefly due to 3 stories around the ship, and they did not portray Ardyn in a good light by any stretch of the imagination. I'm okay with Ardyn being an asshole because he absolutely is. As much as his backstory is tragic, he is a monster. He is a murderer. He is someone that will do what it takes to get what he wants. A proper Final Fantasy villain. His character arc is both horrifying and tragic, and certainly colors the world of Eos as being gray when you consider the justification of the character's actions, including Noctis himself. For as much as Ardyn gets shit on because he's no Kefka or Sephiroth, finding people that like him on Twitter can be difficult. The list of people that I can name off the top of my head is few and far between. Hell, even within our Ardyn community, most of the people that like this character have different interpretations about him. I do not agree with several headcanons that I see about Ardyn, but I keep this shit to myself, because at the end of the day, regardless as to what those headcanons actually are, we have just collectively agreed that our trash man deserves love and adoration, and I'm happy to see that on my Twitter feed. That has always been my stance, and that will always be my stance. And quite frankly, I thought that this was the agreement when being part of a fandom in general was concerned, but clearly this doesn't seem to hold true. Since I joined the Twitter community, I was actually waiting for a zine to come out about Ardyn. There was one Ardyn zine that got cancelled, much to my dismay, but in the 3 years that I've been on Twitter, Lux Corrupta was the only viable zine that happened about Ardyn that I saw, and I was goddamn thrilled about it. Now, Lux Corrupta was advertised as being a canon-style zine dealing with the complex nature of Ardyn. Ardyn has appeared in the main game, episode Prompto, Ignis, and Ardyn, but the only previews that I saw dealt with Ardyn was when he was in his quote-unquote theatrical state. In fact, I'm under the impression that none of the stories that are being written about will touch on Ardyn being the monster that he is. For all of the talk of Ardyn being extremely complex, most of the story previews that I have seen are either before he fell from grace or from the early stages of episode Ardyn and pre-Altitia. And if I'm wrong, by all means correct me, but my point is that for all the supposed complexity that Ardyn has potential for, it got swept under the rug, because again, displaying anything problematic seems to be a bad thing, even when you're talking about the fucking villain of the goddamn story. Now, I'm pretty sure that when applications opened up for this zine, I was one of the first ones to send in my application, and you guessed it, I got rejected. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, I was surprised for the all mentioned points from earlier. I did not believe that many writers had applied to this zine because the numbers didn't add up. But you know, because a zine of this nature was so exceedingly rare, I didn't think too much about it. Now, to this zine's credit, I was actually offered to be given a pitch hitter application. But in all honesty, if I didn't make it in, I doubted that many writers were going to drop out, so I didn't want to give myself hope that wouldn't amount to anything. I was actually bummed out since, you know, over 75% of my stories do have Ardyn featured in it. I generally believe that a fuck ton of awesome people applied to this design, and I just didn't make the cut. And that should have been where it ended. But then I saw who did get on the design, and saw the previews of the writers in questions. And I got suspicious. Now you have to understand that the only works that I bother to read are mature and explicit works. I rarely dip below that rating for personal reasons. I already mentioned that I went through a lot of the Ardyn fics, so I typically know the people that write about him, especially if you write anything above a teen rating. And one thing that I realized, I didn't know a lot of these writers that had gotten on this project. And even though it was a red flag, I was still willing to buy the product at this time. That was until the Writers Showcase came out. Now, learning about the writers didn't bother me. I figured that there were Ardyn people that I didn't realize that were around. This happens on Twitter, it is a big place, and I'm in my own bubble. The other thing that I noticed is that these writers, these lovers of Ardyn, supposedly, nearly said verbatim the same thing about the character in their bio regarding Ardyn. Mostly that he was theatrical and complex. And yes, this is true, but when you keep seeing the same phrase over and over again, that's what kind of gave me pause. There was just no way for all of the things that you could say about Ardyn. Several people would say very surface level observations about him. So I looked at some of these people's work on AO3. Now, the only way to describe how I felt after looking at some of these supposed writers was anger and disappointment. There were over 5 writers' accounts that I looked at. Just about all of them barely had Ardyn mentioned in their story. Some of them haven't even written for the Final Fantasy 15 fandom in years. Others flat out said that they hated the character to the point where they would, quote, leave him out of their writing. And I don't give a flying fuck what you say. If someone says that, even jokingly, why would you think that they are worthy on getting on a project versus someone that generally has expressed adoration and admiration for said character? And, you know, I wouldn't have been as upset about this if it was just me, but it wasn't. There was another very prominent Ardyn writer that also got rejected from this sign. This person talks about Ardyn probably more than me, and their only crime is that their preferred shipped can be viewed as problematic since it's Ardyn not. And now that I said that pairing, unless you've been living under a rock on Twitter, you know exactly who the fuck I'm talking about, and I don't even need to say their username. And that's my issue. This sign purposely chose people that actively hate the character Ardyn and passed over 2 people specifically that actively write about him. Neither of us have been a part of Zines in the past, at least to my knowledge, but instead of us getting a fair shot to participate in a Zine and character that we generally cared about, we got brushed aside. This Zine was not about choosing people that like this character. At least from the writer's side. The artists, from what I saw, were fine, but the writers, absolutely not. Which will always bother me about this sign. And before anyone jumps down my throat about not having experience with being in Zine is likely a factor why I didn't get chosen to be on the sign, first of all, fuck you. If I put in an application, I agree to the terms and conditions of the Zine, then obviously I'm aware of the rules and what is expected in the work and what they are looking for, and by extension, don't want to see. This means that if I have to write for a general or a teen audience, then I'll do it. My personal writings are what I do in my own time, including the subject matter, ships, and ideas. It does not reflect the final project for your Zine project. And if you think otherwise, you can't separate the art from the artist, and that is a personal decision that you have made. If you really want to use the argument that I don't have enough Zine experience against me, I actually had done a reverse bang in the past that featured Ignis in 2021. This particular bang, I did my story on time, as well as served as a pinch hitter for the writer that dropped out. So in all, I had something at least under my belt that proved that I was capable of completing tasks on time. I could work with my artistic partners and communicated with mods to no one's complaint. I think participating in 1 or 2 Zines a year was more than enough. As much as I like the concept of a community project, I like to write my own stories and go at my own pace. Trying to use the fact that I don't jump on every Zine that pops up as an excuse to gatekeep me out of a Zine is one of the dumbest things that I can ever imagine, but what else am I supposed to think? Why ask for an AO3 or portfolio if you aren't going to look at it? My average is 100k words written every year based on my AO3 stats. My weakest year, ironically enough, is the year that I did the Ignis reverse bang, because of mostly in real life things going on with me at the time. And even in my weakest years, I was still actively writing stories for this fandom. I'm not saying that to toot my own horn, but what I am pointing out is that I have been, and always have been, active in this fandom. I have been writing collectively since 2001, and I have never believed that my grasp of the English language is the reason why I get cut from Zines. It can't be, and I won't ever think that it will be the case. No. The only thing that makes sense is I'm not a part of a clique or particular group, and no one wants anything to do with me because of the points I mentioned earlier. I ended up having to mute the Lux Corrupta account because I would get physically ill at the reminder, and it just got too painful to know that the Zine isn't even being based off of merit. Since Ardyn Zines are rare as it is, it was a slap in the face. And you know, I've always had my suspicions about the Zine community, but with a niche character like Ardyn, well, it just becomes more obvious that favoritism is a factor in the selection process. It did kind of show that the hesitation I felt with applying for Ignis-centric Zines might have been warranted. I write about Ignis just as much as I write about Ardyn, but I'm sure that because I ship Ardyn with Ignis, it will be held against me for some bullshit reason. Now in this aftermath, I'll be real and just say that this Zine absolutely broke me. I won't be looking to participate in any more Final Fantasy 15 Zines again unless I'm the one running the show. That takes a lot of time, dedication, and probably will have me paying for some out-of-pocket expenses, I know. And I'm going to have to do things a little bit differently because of the circumstances. I do have a few ideas, but that requires me to seek legal advice when it comes to copyright and publishing laws. That requires me to find a publisher that is not willing to censor writers because of writing something problematic. And that means that I need to get a team of people to help me with my own shortcomings and have experience with this type of thing. This has nothing to do with being a revenge Zine or something stupid like that, but if you don't want anything to do with me, then I'll see if I can build a project with people that genuinely want to be a part of it and are not chosen because of who they are or who they know. Having multiple people do Zines is actually healthy from all involved since people look for different things. Right now, there seems to be the same few people responsible for Zines in the fandom, and that really needs to change for all the points I mentioned. One thing that these Zines have proven to me is that I don't have the time or the patience to be someone I'm not. I shouldn't have to justify why I write the way I do or convince someone that I'm not problematic to put someone's preconceived feelings about me to rest. I would rather write for 10 people that like my art for what it is rather than write for 100 people who actually don't give a shit, but they'll smile to my face when they absolutely revolt me from the inside. If you don't like me, I do encourage you to curate what you see on Twitter and other social media sites by muting or blocking me. Yeah, I might be caught off guard, but I'll at least know to stop bothering said individual. I'm way too old to be dealing with childish bullshit like this, And one of my pet peeves are people not being honest with themselves. And for all I know, maybe there's a reason for it. Are there blacklists out there that say that you can't have or talk to or speak or interact with certain people on Twitter? It sounds silly, but when you consider that there have been people that have lost their actual jobs on Twitter for liking a tweet from a problematic account, it makes you think. I expect this type of drama from the corporate world, but seeing it permeating from the fandom space is wild. For all of these posts I see about being inclusive, representing marginalized people, showing tolerance and understanding, people prove time and time again that they only say bullshit like this to be performative. I personally cannot fathom pretending to be someone I'm not, but this seems to be the standard when people hold on to their opinions and can't voice their concerns. Twitter is not a place to hold good faith conversations. It is designed to be a lynch mob used to dogpile people that have the wrong type of thinking. You can argue if it got better or worse after Elon took over, but at the end of the day, engagement keeps the site going. What I'm not going to do anymore is hold my tongue and just say whatever the fuck I please, since holding myself back has not gotten me anywhere. I'm honestly not this monster that I swear people believe I am. I would like more people to talk to, sure, but I'm not going to be performing like a puppet on strings for someone's amusement. That's not who I am, and that's not who I'll ever be. So I do hope that you realize that some of the grievances I do have about the Final Fantasy XV community at large is warranted. Again, I don't expect anything to be done about it. I've said my piece. I find that making such content makes me reflect on my own issues and with dealing with them in a more constructive way. I'm not sure what is going to happen in the future, but I do know going forward I will curate my own audience and give up on the idea of being part of a community that doesn't seem to want anything to do with me. If anything I said offended you, or someone you know, then that's on them or you. I'm not sorry for speaking honestly about the situation as a whole. And let me be clear, if I have to leave the Final Fantasy XV fandom, I will do so on my own terms. Final Fantasy XVI is right around the corner, and while it might not have the same issues that Final Fantasy XV did, at least I'll have the opportunity to be involved in a fandom that started out with the launch date. If I feel that Final Fantasy XV no longer gives me the joy or passion it once did, then so be it. There are tons of fandom out there that I can get involved in, and plenty of characters that are worthy of my attention. I'm not expecting sunshine and rainbows because I'm not wired like that, and every fandom likely has their own issues. I'm capable of picking and choosing my battles. So, that is all I really wanted to say regarding Final Fantasy XV Zines in generals. I'm going to go ahead and close this matter by just saying that mean what you say when you host these Zines. Asher out.